Husband fights to solve his wife's kidnapping amidst plans of separation. Welcome back to Movies Explained. Today's film is a crime mystery from 2022 titled Last Seen Alive. The movie opens with Detective Roy Patterson intensely interrogating a man inside a vehicle. With a fierce determination, Roy seeks information about the whereabouts of a woman, believed to have been brazenly abducted by this individual in broad daylight. After some coercion, the man coldly confesses that she is already dead. 8 hours before this incident, a married couple, Will and Lisa Spann, are on their way to her parents' house. The atmosphere is a bit tense because the couple is planning to take a break from their relationship due to Lisa's recent affair and her overall dissatisfaction. Will, who doesn't really want to take this break, stalls their arrival by heading to the gas station to fill up his car. He stops and tells Lisa to go on holiday or drive back to their city instead of dropping her at her parents' house. But she insists that she needs this break to reflect on their relationship and her own feelings for him. While Will is busy at the pump, Lisa chooses to venture inside the convenience store. In the restroom, her phone buzzes with a message from Clint, the man she'd been involved with, but she ignores him. After purchasing a bottle of water, she's about to exit when someone calls her name, momentarily capturing her attention. Unbeknownst to Will, who remains focused on the task at hand, a truck blocks our view of the scene, and when it moves, both Lisa and the mysterious individual have vanished. After fueling up his car, Will waits patiently for Lisa to come back. As the minutes drag on, his concern grows. He checks the convenience store and the restroom, but there's no sign of her. Approaching the cashier, he asks if he's seen his wife. Strangely, even though it's evident the cashier had served her earlier, he claims not to have noticed a woman matching Lisa's description. With growing anxiety, Will steps outside and dials Lisa's number, only to be met with her voicemail. Frantically, he shouts her name and combs through the gas station's premises, but she's nowhere to be found. Eventually, Will decides to call the police to report his missing wife, with Detective Roy Patterson taking his call. Roy assures him that he'll send an officer or might even come himself, urging Will to remain at the gas station. But, consumed by panic and fear, Will decides to drive to Lisa's parents' house instead. Upon his arrival, he's met by a puzzled Anna and Barry Adams, who were expecting their daughter to arrive with him. After briefing them on the situation, Will instructs them to stay put in case Lisa returns and suggests they contact her friends nearby to see if she might be with any of them. After Will departs, Barry quickly dials the police. Given Will's erratic behavior, they find him suspicious and are hesitant to place their trust in him. Will returns to the gas station and has a flashback about the recent past, when Lisa first suggested that they take a break. This frustrates Will, and they start arguing. Will says that it's because Lisa is unfulfilled in their marriage, while Lisa just says that she doesn't feel anything for Will anymore, but she doesn't know why. Back in the present, Will gets out of his car to greet Detective Roy, who has finally arrived at the gas station. He explains that it's been about an hour and a half since Lisa went missing, and her parents don't know where she is either. The men go inside the mart to ask the cashier, Oscar, to show them the security footage. Oscar says that their cameras haven't been working for 2 weeks, so Roy decides to prepare an Amber Alert to look for Lisa. He takes Lisa's bag and computer, tells Will to stay put, and drives away. While looking around, Will notices that a security camera outside is actually still recording. He barges into the mart again and demands that Oscar give him the tapes. After getting beat up, Oscar finally tells Will where the recording is shown, and Will grabs the whole machine before driving to the police station. He gives the security tapes to Roy, who asks the IT department to analyze the footage. They finally saw that Lisa was greeted by an unknown man, but she seemed to know him as she continued to chat with him. The man then gestured at her to follow him to his car and opened the door for her. It looks like Lisa was getting into his car before their view was blocked by the big truck. When the truck finally drove away, Lisa and the car were already gone. Will took a picture of the guy's car before Roy asked him to go to a different room for questioning. Roy started out with basic questions, but then he started to ask about Will and Lisa's marital problems. Will was frustrated and upset, saying that Roy should be outside looking for Lisa instead of asking these irrelevant questions. However, Roy said he couldn't overlook the possibility that Will had something to do with his wife's disappearance. He even asked Will if his job as a successful property developer would bring any enemies who might want to kidnap his wife. Growing increasingly frustrated with Detective Roy's persistent questioning and ensuring he's free to leave, Will heads back to Lisa's parents' home. He shows them a photo of the unfamiliar man and his vehicle. To his surprise, the couple identifies the man as Knuckles, a handyman they sporadically employ, and who also happens to be a childhood friend of Lisa's. Anna recalls having seen the car at a location she refers to as Morrison's. With this new lead, Will heads straight to Morrison's, all the while misleading Roy over a call, claiming he's just driving aimlessly around town. When his GPS notifies him that he has arrived, Will gets out of his car, grabs a crowbar, and walks through the woods toward a wooden fence. From the cracks, he can see the car that he's looking for, so he trespasses onto the property and notices Knuckles frantically packing up his stuff. Will silently sneaks into the trailer and threatens Knuckles with his crowbar to tell him where Lisa is. When Knuckles won't answer, Will beats him up until Knuckles finally admits that he left Lisa with a man named Frank, and that he'll take Will to Frank's place if he stops beating him up. Then, Will grabs a gun from Knuckles' trailer before using duct tape to tie Knuckles' hands together and gag him. Will forcefully places Knuckles into the trunk of his car and drives in the direction of what Knuckles has identified as Arthur's location. However, en route, a police officer flags him down for speeding. Will instructs Knuckles to stay quiet while he tries to act natural in front of the officer. However, things take a turn for the worse when the officer instructs Will to step out of the vehicle to inspect the trunk. Will, in a moment of desperation, flees into the nearby woods. Meanwhile, Roy comes back to the gas station to find Oscar, but it turns out that the shift has changed and the cashier is a different man now. He then goes to Lisa's parents' house to ask about Clint, whom Anna says Lisa hasn't been seeing anymore. Roy informs them that the last 3 emails sent to Lisa were from Clint, who keeps begging to see her again, though she never responded. However, nothing suspicious comes up when the police investigate Clint. When Barry demands that the detective take more action to find his daughter, Roy says that there is actually no evidence of a crime based on what they have discovered so far. Back in the woods, Will manages to evade the police and decides to continue towards Frank's place on foot. He follows the sound of gunshots and finds himself on a small paved road. He comes across an ATV, but when he tries to turn it on, a burly man warns him against it and asks who he is. Will pretends that he is looking to do business with Frank and that he knows Frank from Knuckles. The burly man seems unconvinced, but after some fine acting from Will and Frank not answering the man's radio calls, he lets Will continue walking towards Frank's place. Frank's place turns out to be an entire compound full of drug addicts and drug dealers who are cooking up the drugs. Will sneaks around the compound until he finally spots Frank as the man orders around his henchmen. Will continues to sneak around while holding his gun until he ends up in a garage. He gets caught by a man inside a car, but he manages to beat the man up until he passes out. To his surprise, he spots Oscar, realizing he's affiliated with Frank's crew. He grabs the knocked-out man's shotgun and proceeds towards Oscar's direction. His path leads him to a barn, which seems to be the hub of the drug production. Though he accidentally encounters a worker, Will quickly subdues him. Eventually, Will ends up in the main room that is filled with barrels of explosive materials. Seizing the opportune moment, Will bursts into the room, leveling his weapon at Frank and one of his henchmen, Larry. He demands to know Lisa's whereabouts, but Frank feigns ignorance. Growing impatient, Will orders them to open the container, suspecting Lisa might be inside. However, as Larry swings the doors open, Frank unexpectedly opens fire on Will. Will retaliates, shooting Larry dead, and a fierce gunfight ensues with Frank. Dodging bullets, the barn transforms into a deadly maze of hide-and-seek. When Frank fires again, Will's return shot finds its mark, fatally wounding him. To Will's dismay, this leaves him without a source of information on Lisa's whereabouts. As Will exits the barn, he's unaware that the gunfight has sparked a fire near a pool of chemicals. After dispersing the gathered junkies, he spots Oscar emerging from the barn. They draw their guns on each other, but Oscar claims he wasn't involved in Lisa's kidnapping. An uneasy truce forms, as both lower their weapons. Oscar reveals that he knows of Lisa's location, but demands $20,000 in exchange. Will is skeptical, but when Oscar presents Lisa's phone as proof, he begrudgingly agrees to the deal. When the two are arguing about the payment, suddenly the barn blows up in a huge explosion as a result of the small fire from earlier. Back at the police station, Roy receives an update about the incident involving the officer who stopped Will's car. Immediately, they start setting up a perimeter. Soon after, Roy approaches the crime scene, where Knuckles is detained in the backseat of a patrol car. In the present, Roy's grilling Knuckles hard about Lisa's kidnapping. Knuckles gets hit with a flashback, remembering how he cornered Lisa at the gas station, then pulled a knife on her and snatched her up. But face to face with Roy, he's playing it tough, flat out denying everything. Roy's not having any of it, though. He gets in Knuckles' face, threatening him to speak up or he'll spend the rest of his miserable life in jail. Knuckles finally breaks, declaring that Lisa is dead. It turns out that Knuckles had informed Frank about Lisa's plans to return home, suggesting they could kidnap her for a hefty ransom, given Will's wealth. Earlier that day, when Knuckles unexpectedly encountered Lisa at the gas station, he impulsively acted on the plan and took her to Frank's compound. However, Frank was furious that Knuckles had brought Lisa to the location of their drug operation, so he ordered Knuckles to dig a hole for her body. Fearing for his own life, Knuckles disregarded the order and fled the scene. After listening to Knuckles' story, Roy and the police come to Frank's compound to put out the fire and arrest Frank's men. Will, who is sitting by the police car all disheveled by the blast, stands up to greet Roy. When he asks Roy if he's getting arrested for kidnapping Knuckles, Roy only tells him to stay put. Roy walks around the back of one of the buildings and finds a human-sized hole that is covered by some metal. He half expects to uncover Lisa's remains upon lifting the metal, but instead, the pit is empty. As Will roams the area, distant murmurs catch his ear. Following the sound, he stumbles upon Lisa, confined in a diminutive shack. After setting her free, she's desperate to escape this nightmare. "Take me home," she whispers. Without a second thought, Will cradles her in his arms and carries her away from the horror. Now back at Lisa's parents' house, Will is standing on the driveway when Roy arrives after handling the case. Roy mentions that they know Will shot some people dead at the compound, but he decided to let it go and not apprehend Will. The movie ends with Lisa, who takes her husband's hand and invites him to come inside the house with her, indicating that they're not taking that break after all. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more videos.